Well, hello YouTube. It is Monday, I believe it's the 2nd or 3rd of August, and get you caught up on progress on the 1946 CJ2a project. Just continuing with the teardown, and this morning I went ahead and drained all the fluids, the rear diff, the transfer case, the transmission, and the engine, as well as the radiator. And just went through and scraped off the gunk that was on top of the transfer case and the transmission that wasn't able to get with the power wash. And then went ahead and removed the radiator, the piping for the radiator. And then on the, actually, let me back up. We did remove the tub. Took 4 folks and basically just took some 2x4s pretty much under this portion right here where those 2 mount brackets are, and right in front of the, right in behind the shifters for the transfer case there, and then 2 more right back here, right in front of the wheel well. So not underneath the back lip, but right in front of the wheel well. And just lifted it up, and as you recall, wasn't able to get the steering column off. The plan was to just remove the steering wheel and to just lift the tub up and take it on back. And the reason for that is the pitman arm back here, and I'll show you in just a minute on the steering column. But there's a special tool. Now, a lot of people take like a big flathead screwdriver and stick it in there, and maybe a crescent wrench or something, and lean on it, or some vice grips. The proper way to do it is to get the special tool. It's almost like a socket, and it's a little short socket. It's about 2 inches long, and it's got a flat blade on it. So it's almost like a flat bladed screwdriver socket, if you will, but it's only, like I said, 2 inches long, and it goes in the slot in that pitman arm adjuster. You pull the cotter pin out, and then you unscrew it almost to the last couple of threads, and then it'll just come right off that pitman arm ball. Well, I wasn't able to get that. There was just too much stuff in the way, even the exhaust manifold, and just couldn't get it off for whatever reason. There was so much gunk in there over the years, and all of the, whatever that bed liner stuff that one of the previous owners has put on. You know, it's almost about a good 1/8 inch thick on some of the places. A lot of it is flaked off, so it didn't do as well as it was supposed to. But anyway, what I was able to do is, once we got the tub off, is come up here and get the front adjuster, or clamp, and use the special tool, unscrew that pitman arm, and it just fell right off the ball. And then basically take out the 2 bolts that hold this steering mechanism, here and here, and then just rotate the steering column down so it's all nice and straight, and just lever it right out there. So as you can see, it's right over here on the floor. Whoever got happy with the grease gun, trying to keep that lubed up, I don't know if they thought that was going to correct the, the slop in the steering, but it does not. And there was just probably, that's a good 75 years worth of oil or grease on there. It's a combination of original military spec grease. I see some red in there, so somebody's used some of that new special silicone that's out. But I'll show you on the adjuster. So basically your pitman arm ball would go in here, and then this is where I was talking about the special tool would slide in this slot. Let me see if I can't get that zoomed in. There you go. And you unscrew this. I'll take it out here so you can see. And that is what the ball would ride in. And then likewise in here, there's another little concave area. This clamps down on there, and the ball would be in the slot, and that's what allows your steering to work. Well, the one I couldn't get off is back there. Okay, so I went ahead and left it. I haven't taken it off yet. I got it soaking in some PB Blaster. Later on, that's gonna have to be completely disassembled, obviously, and inspected, just to make sure we can get as much slop out of the steering, and make sure that the the adjuster bolt and everything, and obviously clean it up. The good news is these usually break right in here. Just somebody gets cranking on the steering wheel. The good news is, you know, I haven't cleaned them up, but it looks like all those holes are in pretty good shape. So we'll be able to adjust that, or clean it up and then be able to adjust it perfectly the way it was spec'd from the factory. I went ahead and put the Horton button and the spring and the column shaft nut back on there just so it doesn't get misplaced. Those horn buttons, I kind of like to keep everything original because it's kind of cool. And then when we were taking the tub off, I think I mentioned in the previous video that I was able to take this off. So that gave us about, oh, I don't know, a good ½ inch or so more clearance on the tub access port. Let's see. Frame looks really good. I did take a little bit of a scrape, get that bed liner stuff off, and then just a little bit of a hand wire brush. And you can see that the frame's gonna clean up really nice. It's gonna take a lot of effort and a lot of work to get all that rust off of here. Haven't really seen anywhere any breaks or cracks or anywhere so far that the welds would have broke. As you know, they're usually right in there on those cross members. And then here's the remainder of that fender bolt that was going through the tub that I couldn't get that off. So I'll be able to lift that up and then take a grinding wheel and just cut that right off of there. Likewise on that one. So didn't damage any of the frame. Let's see here. Got the exhaust pipe out this morning. Just soak it in PB Blaster. That's all you can do. Just let it set. Took the clamp off up here and then back here, excuse me, and then there was just basically some baling wire that was holding it on back there as well as the muffler. So we'll replace all those hangers with the OEM or new old stock if we can find them. Haven't disassembled anything off of the engine. I mean, I just pulled the Mickey Mouse stuff off the distributor wires, you know, going to the spark plug. I did go ahead and remove the starter this morning, 2 bolts, and then also the alternator and the fan belt. There's a little bit better view of the serial numbers that we were able to see here. And then down here, GPW. And then this is kind of unique. There's just an open hole here. Now the starter would be here. Here's just an open hole. Now I'm not sure if that was maybe a shaft that went to the governor, but you got a hole here, kind of like there would have been a bearing or something. So that may have been the PTO. I'm gonna have to go look that up and see which side of the engine the PTO. It probably makes sense it would have been on this side, the passenger side, and just, you know, run off of the crankshaft there or something. I don't know. That's really unique. It does have the original oil spout. Look at that. It's got that little indention for the governor. So you can always look at the originals and say, wait a minute, that's a different pipe. But if you find that little indention there, you know it's original. And then you can see the 4 freeze plugs there on the side of the engine. So we're looking really good on the originality of this Jeep. Couple of scary things. Alrighty. Top of your transmission, you've got this little breather pop-up vent. And it was in there, but when I went to wipe this off, it just came right out. Now, there's threads on it, and it's not real long, but I don't know if it's going to be able to be threaded back in there. It doesn't look like it will, so that might be stripped out. A new top plate probably isn't going to be an issue, but my concern is if that was waddling around in there, if maybe some of that has fallen down in there and gummed up those gears. So I just went ahead and stuck it back in there just to make sure no foreign debris get into the transmission. The other thing is on this little dust cover on the back of the bell housing, you've got the original bolt here, but I don't know if there's one here, but it doesn't feel, it might be broke off because there's no hole. So a couple of concerns. That's going to take some effort, maybe easy out or something. Might have to drill it out or tap. So that's going to be some time. I did confirm that the paint scheme on the engine was this gray, also the transmission, and really can't make it out too well on the transfer case, but you barely can see, but it is gray. So it's that same kind of slate gray like the block and the transmission belt housing is. Now, I'm gonna go back and make sure whenever we're reassembling it, or actually prepping it, and whenever we're actually putting the paint on, because all this is gonna be painted off of the vehicle or off of the frame. And we're gonna make sure that, you know, the original color scheme is what we're gonna be able to apply back on, depending on what the owner decides. Now, what I've recommended to him is that, you know, go ahead and go black everything on the bottom. You know, nobody's really gonna see that. If you do wanna change anything, change the color of the shocks. You know, maybe make them white or a yellow or something like that, just to have them stand out, give it that cool factor of the 4x4 in the Jeep. But basically everything under here, just black it out, right? Use some really good paint, black it out, and then engine, transmission, bell housing, and transfer case, make that all a gray, and then the radiator black, and then all of the brackets that would hold the oil filter on, the air filter, and those themselves, just clean up that paint or polish it as much as we can, or reapply some paint on there and make it kind of a glossy color. And then as far as the body and the fenders and the hood and everything and the windshield and windscreen, I mean, the original, what we saw was kind of that harvest tan, so that might be really nice. And then maybe black out the Willys lettering on the windscreen, and then also on the side of the hood, just so everybody knows you have a Willys, and then also on the back of the tailgate. Or the owner was thinking about that Michigan yellow, and that was what you saw in the previous videos, when we were trying to figure out which layer of paint was on top of which, just because there's so much overspray and all of that from previous owners that have applied a different paint job. But that Michigan yellow, you don't see a lot of Jeeps out there, old CJs. You see red, you see blue, but I have not seen a lot of the harvest tan. But I think if he goes either one of the harvest tan or the yellow, I think it's really gonna pop and it's gonna stand out. The yellow obviously more so, but the harvest tan, I think, is really gonna be something that's gonna make this a unique vehicle, and especially if it brings it back to the original, what it was when it came out of the factory. So more to come. I did want to point out too, it does have, now a lot of people don't know this, but there's a hole in the front of the bumper, in the front of the frame here. Well, what is that for? Well, if you look real close under there, you'll see right about where my finger is. Let's see if we can't get that. Right under that, right there. You see that nut, and that is your crankshaft pulley, and you'll see it's got a little rod in it. Well, guess what? This lines up with that rod, and you see in there? And what that's for is a hand crank. So if you were out in the field and your battery died, you couldn't get it started, you would actually stick your hand crank rod in there, like the old Model T, and you would stand up here and you would be able to crank your engine over manually. Now that's super dangerous. And as you know, the old Model Ts, a lot of people had head injuries. A lot of people died before. Actually, I think it was Cadillac that came out with the very first electric starter that solved all that problem. And then of course your Fords and your Buicks and everything that followed later on, and your Dodges had, did I say Buick? I think Dodge. They all had the electric starter, and that was a big selling point because people didn't have to get out of their cab. They didn't have to come out here and actually hand crank, or if you were really well off, you didn't have to hire your driver and put them at risk of actually coming up here and manually crank over an engine. So a little bit of history there for anybody that's listening. Correct me if I'm wrong, but read a lot about that, especially Henry Ford and his up and coming in the world and mass production and everything. So still documenting, still taking a lot of photos. Each thing that's taken off, I've taken snapshots. Anything that I found that was scary to me, like that little dust vent on that, I've taken a picture, and just so I can confirm, you know, if this is going to have to get fixed. And then, as far everybody knows, these things have super sloppy steering. A lot of people that rebuild these, they don't actually set the preload on the bearings on the front axle. And if you don't do that, you're going to have some slop there, and it's just going to result going right up your steering, right up your pitman arm, and then into your steering wheel. And you're going to have that good, you know, 2, 4, 5, 6 inches of play where you're up there trying to turn that steering wheel. And the slop is actually starting out here in your bearings. So as we disassemble that, I'll take some pictures, probably set up another video on how to set the preload. It's really easy. Just use shims. And then you use actually a fish scale, or, you know, a pull scale, and you use your finger and you stick it in the hook in there and you just pull, and you want to have it, I believe it's like 14 pounds. I'll confirm that in the specs in the manual, but that's how much preload you want on your front axle. I did, like I said, I drained all the fluids. This one up front, the fluid that came out of that front axle, as you know, the fluid only remains right in there. Then you've got your shaft, and you've got a seal, and then this is just packed with axle grease over here on the balls over here on the what do they call that? See, the original CV axles here. But anyway, right here in that pumpkin is where your fluid is, differential fluid, lubricant. And when I drained that, it came out of there thicker than molasses. And I'm going to show you over here the different viscosities, obviously, and the colors. But if you see that kind of on this side over here, that kind of that's your transfer case and your transmission, okay? But this real dark stuff right here, that's what came out of the front differential. And if you see, those aren't bubbles. Those are actually little, like, chunks of grease. So either that stuff has been in there so long, or somehow the grease that's packed in this, you know, in the sides of the axle has transferred down the axle shafts into that pumpkin through those worn out seals on each side here and here on the inside of that pumpkin. So more to come. It doesn't look like there's any metal flakes in there. The drain plug itself wiped right off. Didn't look like there was any chunks of metal or any teeth. So I'm pretty hopeful it's just going to be seals in there, and then we'll set the lash and make sure the teeth and the pinion is lined up and all that. That's going to be a totally separate video in the future, but and I'll do that probably on the front axle. I don't know if I'll do the back axle on video, but I'm going to show you on the front axle how to do everything up here. And the reason for that, this is a little bit more involved. You've got your steering knuckles, you've got your, you know, your axle, your hub, and you've got your drum on both sides. And then you've got your two-piece little, I think they're called wiper gaskets here, that are basically just a plate. Now you'll see this is gray. So I'm not sure if somebody has actually got in there before, or if that's just been painted, overspray or something like that. This one looks a little bit, yeah, it's a little gray, I guess, but you can see the overspray on that gray primer where they hit it on the frame on the front here. So somebody just walked around with a paint gun and just hit it. But everything's coming apart nicely. I did want to share, when you're doing a restoration, obviously safety first, wear goggles, I wear overhauls, you know, face shield or what have you. This stuff right here, PB Blaster, shout out to that. That is an old formula that's been around for a long time. The reason, as you can see, since 1957, the reason people swear by that, it works. You can get freeze out or WD-40 or anything like that, but if you use PB Blaster on those old rusted bolts and all of those things that are seized up, just squirt it on there, let it set, give it a couple of light little taps, just a little bitty tap with a hammer, just almost just like that tink, and then spray a little bit more on there. It might take a couple of days, be patient, but that stuff will work for you. If this doesn't free it up, you can attempt to use heat, torch method, but I don't like doing that because it's a fire hazard. And when you're working on these old vehicles, you know, you see all the grease and the grime. That's just waiting to catch on fire. And if you know anything about thick grease, if it catches fire, it takes a lot to put it out. Like I said, I keep my fire extinguisher close by. Safety first. Now back to how I cleaned off all the top of that gunk. Different methods. I like the paint scraper method, and I like to use it this way, pulling towards me. I don't go this way because, you know, don't go away from you. You'll gouge the metal. But if you get in there and you scrape it this way, you'll have less tendency to scrape up the item that you're scraping. And you also you won't dig into it. You know, you might not hit a chip on your manufacturing mark, or you might not, you know, there might be a serial number sticking out somewhere, and you might catch that, and then all of a sudden you just, you know, gouge it, and now a 3 looks like a 5. The other thing is just a standard wire brush. The owner actually left that in the tub, and I've borrowed that. I'll make sure to get that back to him, but that works really well. Make sure that your bristles aren't sticking all out on the side. This one's about worn out, so you see how here. Make sure that's not sticking out on the side too much, depending on what you're working on. If you're in a tight place and you're trying to clean something up and you don't want to scrape like a plastic item like this, or that you're going to reuse, be careful with that wire, with those bristles sticking out like that. And then just a regular old cheap, you know, 99 cent or less. I think you can get a package of these for like $4. Just I think they call it a touch-up brush, and or chip brush. And you just use that as you use your paint scraper, your brush. You just take that and you wipe it off, and you'll eventually get to the point to where it'll look pretty much just like that. Okay, this black on here is just paint, so. But got all that crud off there, anything that wasn't power washed. There's still a lot has to be scraped off, so, you know, wire wheel, brass wire wheel, additional chemical treatment, maybe some sort of some mineral spirits and a rag, just to get that all prepped for the paint and the primer and everything. And then the frame, and it's come good. So I think I'm gonna call it a day and go ahead and recoup. And this will be the end of this progress video. I'll pick up in the next day or next couple of days. Next thing that's gonna need to happen is removal of just the attachments on the engine, the intake manifold, the exhaust manifold, the fan, the pulley, water pump, and then the oil filter there. Just get it as light as we can so that we can get that cherry picker and get it close to the getting ready to get on an engine stand. Now you can rebuild these sitting right in the engine or in the frame just like this. I don't like to do that. I'm gonna flip it over, and then I'm gonna spec out the bearings and everything, because this is a full restoration. And then the pumpkin and the transfer case and the transmission itself will come later. But initially just want to get that off. I went ahead and blasted or PB Blaster down in here just to make sure we don't, you know, break off any spark plugs in the cylinder head there. And then spending the remainder of my time when I'm not actually out here tinkering on it, researching and a little bit on the forums, just asking a couple of questions to some folks that are out there in the community, and making sure that we're going to be able to do this right and get it back to original as we can. So with that, we will call it good. Have a good day, and everybody be safe out there and take care.